They lied to you about wealth, not with one lie, but with 1,000 small ones, repeated so often that they began to sound like truth. They told you money is earned by strain, that it comes only by long years of labor, that it belongs to a select few, and that you must chase it like a frightened man chasing a shadow at dusk. They told you that if you could only do more, sacrifice more, worry more, then perhaps life would finally reward you. And because you believed them, you have spent your strength wrestling with effects, while never touching the cause. Now listen to me carefully. I am not speaking of luck. I am not speaking of chance. I am not speaking of some fickle fortune that smiles on one man and ignores another. I am speaking of law. And law, unlike opinion, does not change to suit the crowd. Law is impersonal. It is exact. It is faithful. It never fails. Men fail because they do not understand what the law is, and so they use it blindly, often against themselves. If you will remain with me, you will learn why money follows you when you stop pursuing it as though it were outside of you, and begin to live from the state that produces it. You will learn why the wealthy man is not wealthy because he has money, but because he has assumed a state of being in which money is natural, expected, and ordinary. You will learn why the poor man may receive money and still remain poor, because he continues to occupy the state of poverty even while holding a handful of coins. And you will learn how to change your state so completely that the world must in time reflect it back to you. Because the world is not the cause, the world is the effect. Most of the world will never accept this. They will argue with it, they will call it foolish. They will insist that circumstances create life, that wages create security, that markets create opportunity, that other men create your fortune. And so they will go on waiting. They will go on pleading. They will go on living as servants of what they can see. But you are listening to me now. And that means you are ready to consider something that will either frighten you or set you free. It is not work that makes you rich. Work is not the cause. It is not luck that makes you wealthy. Luck is not the cause. It is not even money that makes you secure. Money is not the cause. Consciousness is the only cause. And if you do not understand this, you will continue to treat wealth as a distant prize, always somewhere ahead of you, always just beyond reach, always arriving for someone else. You will keep saying, one day, and one day will never arrive. You will keep saying, when, and your life will remain a waiting room. But if you understand it, if you grasp it with something deeper than the intellect, then you will see why I say money follows you when you stop chasing it. You see, what you call money is not what you think it is. You have been taught to treat it as power in itself, as though numbers could think, as though paper could decide, as though metal could judge your worth. You have been trained to fear it, to crave it, to resent those who have it, and to measure your life by its presence or absence. Yet, money is only a shadow. It is the visible sign of an invisible state. It is the echo of an inner acceptance. It is the outpicturing of an assumption. And if you continue to fight shadows, you will exhaust yourself. You can no more change your financial world by battling the outer facts than you can change your reflection in a mirror by arguing with the glass. The mirror only reflects. It cannot initiate. It cannot create. It can only show you what you are being. So the question is not, how can I get money? The question is, what am I being that produces this lack or this plenty? For every man, every woman is living in a state, and the state you occupy is the life you experience. Now, I do not say this to blame you. I say it to free you. Because if you believe the cause is outside, you are helpless. You will always be at the mercy of events, of men, of seasons, of conditions that rise and fall like waves. But if you accept that the cause is within you, then you possess the one thing that can never be taken from you, the power to change the state. And when the state changes, the world must change. Not because you force it, not because you persuade it, not because you manipulate it, but because the world is yourself pushed out. It is your consciousness made visible, and it has no choice but to conform to the pattern you hold within. This will sound too simple to the mind that has been trained to struggle. And because it is simple, most dismiss it. Yet, all the great truths are simple. They are hidden, not by complexity, but by their nearness. They are so close to you that you overlook them. Here is the law in the plainest language I can give you. Assumption creates reality. An assumption, though false, if persisted in, will harden into fact. And if you persist in the assumption of being unsupported, you will be unsupported. If you persist in the assumption of being overlooked, you will be overlooked. If you persist in the assumption of being unlucky, life will show you misfortune until you are convinced you have been cursed. Not because life is cruel, but because life is faithful to the state you inhabit. But if you persist in the assumption of being supplied, of being favored, of being secure, of being guided into opportunities, of being the kind of person for whom money appears easily and naturally, then life must bring your world into harmony with that inner decree. That is why I say to you, it is not luck, it is not work, it is law. And what you think is money is not money. Money is not the cause of wealth, it is the evidence of wealth. Wealth is a state of consciousness. It is the feeling of already having enough. It is the quiet certainty that you are provided for. It is the inner atmosphere of security, of ease, of expectation. And when that state becomes yours, when you dwell in it until it feels natural, money follows it as faithfully as a shadow follows the body. It may come through wages, it may come through gifts, it may come through a chance meeting that is not chance at all. It may come through a door you did not see yesterday, but it will come, for the law cannot fail. Now I know the heart will ask, but how can I assume wealth when my senses deny it? How can I feel secure when the figures say otherwise? How can I live as though I have when I do not see it? That is the right question, and I will answer it. But you must first be willing to stop kneeling before the evidence of the senses as though it were God. The senses only report. They do not create. They tell you what has been impressed upon you in the past. They show you the harvest of yesterday's inner speech. They cannot show you what you are planting now until the seed breaks through the surface. And so if you judge your new assumption by what you presently see, you will abandon it before it has time to become fact. You will dig up the seed. You will call the law a lie. And you will return to the old state, not because the law failed, but because you refuse to remain faithful to what you had planted. But you will not do that, not if you truly hear me, because in this teaching, you will learn how to impress wealth upon the subconscious so deeply that it becomes inevitable. You will learn the difference between saying words and occupying a state. You will learn how to use the moment before sleep, the most fertile moment of all, to enter the feeling of being already supplied, already secure, already free. And when we are finished, you will not simply know what to do, you will know what to be. And from that being, wealth will follow you. I speak to you as one who has watched men search for security with trembling hands. I have stood before audiences in great halls and small rooms. I have seen the anxious faces of those who carried the weight of unpaid obligation. I have listened to the quiet confessions of men who felt ashamed of their fear, and women who felt tired of being strong for everyone else. I have heard the same questions repeated in different voices, in different places, under different conditions, and yet the question is always one and the same. How do I become safe? How do I become free? How do I live without this constant dread of not having enough? You see, the world has always had its storms. Conditions rise and fall. Seasons change. Markets shift. Men praise a thing one year and condemn it the next. There are times when work is plentiful and times when work is scarce. There are times when opportunity seems near at hand and times when it seems hidden behind iron doors. And when the outer world shakes, the heart of man begins to shake with it unless he has found the one thing in himself that cannot be shaken. That is why I say to you that my message is not bound to a particular decade, a particular city, or a particular circumstance. It is not a message for one class of men and not another. It is not a message for those who have already made it and not for those who are still struggling. It is a message of law, and law is the same in every land, For the law of consciousness does not change because the world changes its costume. When I first began to speak publicly of these things, many were offended. Some thought it dangerous. Some thought it blasphemous. Some thought it naive. They were accustomed to the old pattern, to think of life as something done to them, to think of fortune as something granted by another, to think of God as a power outside themselves, and wealth as a power outside themselves, and therefore they stood always in a posture of waiting. But I had proven in my own experience that the outer world is an echo, and that the echo changes when the voice changes. I did not come to this understanding by reading about it in some distant book and adopting it as a pleasant theory. I came to it through experience, through testing, through the simple willingness to dare to assume, even when reason protested, even when the senses denied it, even when everything outside seemed to say, "You are dreaming." And because I have proven it, I can speak to you with certainty. Not the certainty of arrogance, but the certainty of one who has watched the law operate again and again in himself and in others, with a consistency more exact than any mechanical process. When a man understands the law, he no longer feels like a leaf blown about by the wind. He becomes rooted. He becomes calm. He begins to move through life with an inner poise, because he knows where causes are born. Now, if you are listening to me, perhaps you have lived with that heavy sensation that comes when you look to the future and do not know what it will bring. Perhaps you have felt the tightness in the chest that comes when a bill arrives, or when the mind begins to count and calculate and wonder how it will all be managed. Perhaps you have felt the subtle humiliation of wanting more, but not knowing how to escape the pattern you have known for years. I tell you, you are not alone. And I tell you something more. You are not condemned. Most men assume they are condemned by circumstance. They assume they are sentenced by the conditions of the world. They assume that if they were born into one place rather than another, if they had met a certain person, if they had chosen a different path, then perhaps life would have been kinder. And in that assumption, they remain bound, not by the world, but by their concept of themselves within the world. Because the world is only showing them the state they occupy. This is why I insist, again and again, that the outer world is not the cause. It is the effect. The cause is always within. And until you accept this, you will remain at the mercy of appearances. Now I know there are those who will say, "But surely, Neville, there are facts. Surely, there are conditions. Surely, there are limits." And I say, yes, there are facts. But facts are only the past made visible. Facts are yesterday's assumptions hardened into today's conditions. They are not the ultimate reality. They are the shadow. And you are not here to worship shadows. You are here to change the light. So I do not ask you to deny what you see in a foolish way. I ask you to understand what you see. I ask you to recognize it as an echo. An echo can be loud, but it has no mind of its own. It cannot begin anything. It can only repeat. And that is why I tell you that poverty is not an event. It is not a single misfortune that struck you like lightning. It is not merely a number in a purse or a balance in an account. Poverty is a state. It is a way of being. It is a feeling tone. It is an inner atmosphere of not enough. An assumption that life is tight, that support is scarce, that money is hard, that doors are closed, that you must struggle and strain to survive. And when that state is your home, life will furnish that home with experiences that match it. It will give you the evidence, it will give you the reasons, it will give you the confirmation, and you will call it reality, never realizing you are living in the house you built in imagination. But the moment you see it as a state, you have already begun to rise out of it. For a state can be left. A state can be entered. A state is not you. It is what you are wearing. And just as you may lay aside one garment and put on another, so you may lay aside the state of lack and put on the state of abundance. You may move from the inner climate of fear to the inner climate of security. You may move from the assumption of "I never have enough" to the assumption of "I am always supplied." And when you do, the world must in time clothe itself in the garments that correspond to your new state. That is why I say the world changes, but the law does not change. Men may build new cities, and new machines and new institutions, but the human heart remains the same, and the law of consciousness remains the same. The same imagination that created yesterday is creating today, and it will create tomorrow. It is always operating. It never sleeps. So in this hour, I am not giving you a new superstition. I am not offering you a charm. I am not teaching you a trick. I am pointing you back to the one power you have been using all your life, without knowing it. And when you know it, you will use it deliberately. You will no longer drift. You will no longer wait. You will no longer plead. You will begin to assume, and from that assumption, wealth will follow you. Now we come to the foundation, the stone upon which everything else must rest. Consciousness is the only reality. I do not say this as a poetic phrase. I do not say it to comfort you. I say it because it is true, and because once you see it, you will stop wasting your strength on battles you cannot win. For the common man spends his life fighting the mirror, and then wonders why the reflection never changes. Do not fight the mirror. If you stand before a mirror with a troubled face, and you dislike what you see, would you strike the glass? Would you shout at the reflection? Would you beg it to smile? No, you would change your own expression, and the mirror, having no will of its own, would reflect the change immediately. Your world is a mirror. It is not the cause. It is the reflection. And until you accept this, you will go on trying to change effects while leaving causes untouched. You will attempt to force the outside to give you what you have not yet accepted within. You will seek security in wages, in circumstances, in other men's decisions, and you will live in fear because everything outside you is unstable. It rises and falls. It changes. It can be taken. It can be delayed. It can disappoint you. But what is within you is the cause. And the cause is stable because it is the very root of your experience. Now I know how the mind protests. It says, but surely the cause is my salary. Surely the cause is my employer. Surely the cause is the condition of the world. And I tell you, no, these are not causes. They are only channels. They are means through which your state expresses itself. They are instruments, not authors. The cause is your state. The cause is the concept you hold of yourself. The cause is what you are aware of being. For the whole of life is nothing more than states made visible. You enter a state, and the world arranges itself around you to confirm it. You leave a state, and that world fades away, and another takes its place. You do not notice this, because the changes are often gradual, and the mind is trained to blame the outer scene. But watch closely, and you will see that the outer always follows the inner. Let me make it plain, with a simple picture. Two men may work in the same place, under the same roof, under the same conditions, for the same wage. They may perform the same tasks and live in the same neighborhood. And yet one seems to prosper, while the other seems always to struggle. One finds himself lifted by life, while the other finds himself pressed down by it. If you ask the world, it will give you many explanations. It will speak of education, of connections, of timing, of temperament, of good fortune. And all these may appear to be causes, yet they are not causes. They are effects, effects of a deeper thing. The deeper thing is self-concept. One man, perhaps without knowing it, carries within himself an assumption of worth. He feels, quietly, that life is for him. He expects opportunity. He expects support. He expects increase. He does not even call it a belief. It is simply the atmosphere he lives in. He may have moments of doubt, yes, but his dwelling place is confidence. His inner speech, even when he is not watching it, has a certain ease about it. He says to himself, in 1,000 subtle ways, I am the kind of man to whom good things happen. The other man carries a different atmosphere. He may be good, honest, hard-working, and still he assumes himself to be overlooked. He expects disappointment. He expects struggle. He expects that life will be tight and that money will be hard. He says, perhaps without speaking it aloud, I am not the one chosen. I am not the one favored. I must fight for scraps. And because he lives in that state, life shows him evidence of it again and again. Now tell me, is the wage the cause? Is the employer the cause? Is the place the cause? No. The state is the cause. The wage is only the mirror. It reflects the inner climate. And until the inner climate changes, the reflection must remain faithful. This is why I say to you that you cannot truly become wealthy by manipulating effects. You may change jobs. You may move to another city. You may work longer hours. You may chase new opportunities. And sometimes these things will help for a season. But if you carry the same state with you, you will recreate the same conditions in a new form. The names will change, the faces will change, the streets will change, but the feeling will return, because the feeling is the state, and the state is you. Do you see now why so many feel trapped? They believe the world is acting upon them, and so they stand outside themselves, pleading with a shadow to change. They say, if only this would happen. If only that person would give me a chance. If only the conditions would improve. And they wait, not realizing that life is waiting for them. For the law is this: the outer must conform to the inner. The shadow follows the body. The reflection follows the face. So what must you do? You must change the state. You must change the concept of self from which you live. And you must do it not as a momentary enthusiasm, not as a brief emotional high, but as a dwelling place. You must move in. You must live there. You must make it natural. Now I know that word natural is important, and we will speak of it at length. For the subconscious accepts what feels natural as true, and what feels natural becomes your world. But for now, let it be enough to understand this: your life is not a random series of events. It is a faithful mirror. It is consciousness objectified. Therefore, stop pleading with effects. Stop blaming the salary. Stop blaming the employer. Stop blaming the conditions. These are only the instruments through which your state has been expressing itself. And if you wish wealth to follow you, you must first become the one to whom wealth is natural. You must first accept within yourself the feeling of being already supplied, already supported, already favored. And then the outer world, without strain, without your anxious manipulation, will begin to move in ways you could not have planned, bringing you the evidence of the state you have occupied. That is the meaning of my statement. Consciousness is the only reality. It is the cause, and everything else is effect. Now, if you have understood this, you are ready for the next lie to be torn out by the root, the lie that toil creates wealth, and that struggle is your savior. Now let us tear out the lie that has kept more men in bondage than any prison ever built. The lie is that money is the reward of sweat. The lie is that struggle is the price of supply. The lie is that if you can only push harder, rise earlier, stay later, grind longer, then life will finally hand you what you deserve. And because you believe that lie, you have been trained to respect exhaustion as though it were virtue, and to mistrust ease as though it were a sin. You have been taught that if money comes quickly, it must be undeserved. If opportunity arrives without strain, it must be suspicious. If a door opens without a fight, it must be temporary. So you cling to effort, not because effort has always helped you, but because effort feels familiar. It feels like control. It feels like doing something. Yet the law does not respond to strain. The law responds to state. Let me speak plainly. If money were the product of labor, the hardest workers in the world would be the wealthiest. But you know that is not true. Look at the man who bends his back from morning until evening, whose hands are rough and tired, whose body is worn by years of effort. Look at the woman who gives her whole strength to her duties, who has scarcely a moment to breathe, and yet who still lies awake at night, wondering how it will all be managed. Are these always the ones surrounded by abundance? No. Often they are the ones who feel the tightness most acutely. Meanwhile, another man, who seems almost effortless, moves through life as though doors were built to open for him. Opportunities rise, assistance appears. Money comes not only through work, but through a chain of events he could never have engineered by strain alone. And the world looks at him and says, he is lucky, or he has connections, or he is favored. They search for an outer explanation, because they cannot bear the truth that the difference is not in labor but in consciousness. This is not a condemnation of work. Work has its place. It is a channel. It is a means. It is one of the many ways in which a state may express itself. But work is not the cause. Consciousness is the cause, and when you mistake the channel for the cause, you become a slave to the channel. You begin to believe you must constantly do more to deserve more, and you live in a state of strain. And that state of strain will reproduce itself as more reasons to strain. For this is what men do not see. The law always multiplies your state. If you live in the assumption, I must struggle to survive, life will show you a world that demands struggle. If you live in the assumption, there is never enough, life will show you reasons. There is never enough. If you live in the assumption money is hard to come by, life will show you a world in which money is always just beyond reach, always requiring another sacrifice. And then you will call it reality, never knowing you are living in the outpicturing of your own inner decree. Now I must press this upon you, with all the weight it deserves. The outer world is not the source of your wealth. It is the witness of your state. It is the shadow, not the substance. To toil without changing the inner state is to polish the mirror while refusing to change the face. You may polish that mirror until your hands bleed, but the reflection will remain what it is, because the face has not changed. And the face in this metaphor is your concept of self, your inner I am, the state you occupy when no one is watching and you are alone with your thoughts. This is why I tell you that the most important work you will ever do is not the work of your hands, but the work of your imagination. I am not asking you to become idle. I am asking you to become wise. I am asking you to stop worshipping effort as though effort were God. I am asking you to see that the same labor performed from a state of abundance yields a different harvest than labor performed from a state of fear. The same action done by two men can produce different results, because action is not the creative power. The creative power is consciousness. Do you see now the tragedy of the common belief? A man believes money comes only by hard labor, and so he spends his days chained to the treadmill. He rises with dread. He works with anxiety. He counts with fear. And even if he receives more, he fears it will leave, because he has not changed the state. He has merely added to the shadow while leaving the inner poverty intact. So he remains exhausted, and the exhaustion itself becomes his life. Another man discovers that money is not the cause of wealth, but the effect of a state. He begins to claim within himself the feeling of being supplied. He begins to speak from that state. He begins to live from that state. He does not chase the outer world with desperation, because he knows the outer world must chase the inner decree. He moves through his days with a different atmosphere, and because his atmosphere has changed, his world changes. Opportunities that once would have passed him by now seem to find him. People who once would have ignored him now notice him. Doors that once seemed locked now open. And again the world calls it luck, but it is not luck, it is law. And here is the part that will either awaken you or offend you. As long as you believe money lives outside of you, you will pursue it like a beggar. You will plead for it. You will bargain for it. You will chase it. You will fear it. You will envy those who seem to possess it. And even if it comes, you will hold it with trembling hands, because you believe the source is outside, and therefore you can lose it at any moment. But the moment you accept that the source is within you, everything changes. You stop being a beggar. You begin to assume the state of one who already has. You begin to think from abundance, not of abundance. You begin to live with the inner dignity of supply, and the outer world begins to mirror it. Now I know the mind will ask, but how do I do that? How do I change the state when the facts shout the opposite? How do I feel supplied when the purse feels light? We are coming to that. And I tell you, the method is simpler than you suspect, but the simplicity is exactly why most miss it. They look for a complicated method, because they believe their problem is complicated. They look for a distant power, because they believe the power is distant, yet the power is near. It is your own awareness. It is your own I am. And in a moment I will show you how that I am, when joined to wealth and sealed with feeling, becomes a command that the subconscious must fulfill. For the subconscious does not respond to your effort. It responds to your assumption. And once you understand the difference, you will stop spending your life as a servant of sweat, and you will begin living as the operant power. Now we come to the name that governs your financial world more surely than any coin, any contract, or any circumstance you can point to. The name is I am. When Moses stood before the burning bush and asked, "When they ask me who has sent me, what shall I say?" The answer given was not a distant title in the sky. It was not a grand name meant to impress the crowd. It was the simplest and most profound revelation ever given to man. I am that I am. Tell them I am has sent you. That name is not a name you utter only in temples. It is the name you utter every day, often without knowing what you are doing. It is the silent awareness at the center of your being, the sense that you exist, the feeling of being, the presence within you that says quietly, before all words, before all labels, before all history, I am. And because that presence is the creative power, because it is God in man, every time you attach something to that name, you are issuing a decree. Each I am is a decree. It is not merely speech. It is not mere description. It is a creative act. The subconscious hears your I am as law. Do you see now why this matters so deeply? Because the majority of people are decreeing poverty all day long without realizing it. They do not call it a decree. They call it being realistic. They call it just telling the truth. They call it being responsible. But the subconscious does not understand your excuses. It understands your feeling. And it understands your identity. It hears your I am. And it accepts it as the pattern it must outpicture. When a man says, I am always short, he has spoken a prophecy. When he says, I am never quite ahead, he has set a boundary. When he says, I am not the kind of person money stays with, he has written the script and then wonders why the play never changes. And the tragedy is that he does this with the divine name itself. For the name I am is the name of God, and to speak it carelessly is to take that name in vain. Now most have been taught that taking the name in vain means to curse with the lips, but the deeper truth is far more subtle. You take the name in vain when you join the sacred I am to a condition you do not wish to experience, and then watch it come alive. If you say, I am broke, you are not merely describing a moment in time. You are joining the creative name to a state. You are planting a seed. You are giving the subconscious an instruction. And the subconscious, faithful servant that it is, will set about producing the experience that corresponds to your decree. I am broke is inverted prayer. It is prayer turned backward. It is the use of creative power to build the very prison you wish to escape. Now, if you can hear that without shame, you are already free. I do not speak this to condemn you, but to awaken you. For the moment you see that your inner speech is creative, you will stop speaking death over your own life. And here is what almost everyone misses. This is why some receive, while others repeat cycles. The one who receives has learned consciously or unconsciously to claim a different identity. He has learned to think of himself as the one to whom life is generous. He has learned to live from the assumption of supply. He has learned to attach his I am to abundance, to favor, to freedom. The one who repeats cycles may try many things outwardly. He may change jobs. He may make plans. He may labor faithfully. But inwardly, he continues to whisper the same names. I am behind. I am unlucky. I am always struggling. And because the subconscious accepts that identity as true, it must reproduce it in the world of facts. So the cycle repeats, not because he is cursed, but because he is consistent. The law is not cruel, it is consistent. And it is here that I must give you a truth that will change the way you look at money forever. Your bank is a delayed echo. It is not your present cause. It is the echo of past states. It is yesterday's assumption made visible. It is the harvest of seeds planted earlier, through inner speech, through feeling, through the concept of self you entertained, often without noticing it. This is why a man may wake in the morning, look at his circumstances, and feel discouraged. He thinks nothing has changed. He thinks the law has failed. He thinks my assumption did not work. But what he is looking at is not the result of what he assumed last night. He is looking at the echo of what he assumed for years. And when he judges his new seed by yesterday's harvest, he abandons the seed before it can grow. So I say to you, do not measure the truth of your new assumption by the old echo. The echo takes time. The seed is planted now. And if you persist, the echo must change. Now let me bring this down to the simplest, most practical level. Every time you say I am, you are choosing a state. Every time you join those words to a feeling, you are impressing the subconscious, and the subconscious does not judge. It does not argue. It does not ask whether you deserve it. It simply receives, it conceives, and in time, it gives birth to what it has received. So if you have been saying, I am worried, you have been planting worry. If you have been saying, I am always short, you have been planting shortage. If you have been saying, I am not safe, you have been planting the conditions that mirror unsafety. But you may change it now. You may take the divine name and join it to the state you wish to experience. You may say, I am supplied, and mean it. You may say, I am secure, and feel it. You may say, I am prosperous, and live from it. Now here is where many stumble. They think the power is in the words alone. They repeat, I am wealthy, like a chant, while inside they still feel like the same frightened person. And then they say, it does not work. But the words are not the power. The state is the power. The feeling is the power. The inner acceptance is the power. I am is the name. Feeling is the seal. When the name is joined to a state and sealed with feeling, the subconscious accepts it as reality. And when the subconscious accepts it as reality, the world must in time reflect it as fact. This is why I tell you that your financial life is not truly determined by your employer, nor by conditions, nor by what you call luck. It is determined by the identity you occupy. It is determined by what you have dared to call yourself in the silence of your own heart. So I ask you gently, without accusation, but with the seriousness this deserves, what have you been calling yourself? When you are alone, when you are tired, when you are anxious, what name do you give yourself? What do you join to I am? For if you trace that back honestly, you will see the blueprint of your world. And here is the good news. The blueprint can be changed. Not tomorrow, not someday. Now, but before we speak of how to change it, I must show you why so many prayers for money fail, even when they are sincere. They fail because they are spoken from the wrong identity, from the state of the one who does not have. And the subconscious, hearing that state, can only produce more of the same. So now we turn to the language the subconscious actually understands. It does not understand begging. It understands feeling. And feeling, rightly used, is the secret by which I am becomes wealth made visible. Now I want to speak to you with tenderness, because many who come to this teaching carry a quiet disappointment. They have tried. They have repeated words. They have sat in silence and attempted to imagine. They have prayed in the only way they knew. And when nothing appeared at once, they concluded that either the law was false, or that they themselves were somehow unfit for it. And I tell you plainly, the law is not false, and you are not unfit. If your affirmations have failed, it is not because you are powerless. It is because you were never taught how the subconscious receives an impression. You were taught to worship words when the subconscious is moved by feeling. You were taught to ask from distance when creation is done by assumption. You were taught to look at the mirror for permission when the mirror can only reflect what you have already accepted within. So do not condemn yourself. Do not add shame to the burden. There is no shame in not knowing. There is only freedom in learning. Let me show you, gently and clearly, why so many speak words and see little change. First, they repeat words without feeling. They take a phrase, I am wealthy, I am supplied, I am prosperous, and they repeat it again and again, as though repetition itself were power. They speak it like a man reciting a line. He does not believe. They speak it while their heart remains tight, while their stomach remains knotted, while their mind remains fixed upon the same old fears. And because they do not feel the new state, the subconscious does not receive it as a fact. It remains a sound on the surface, like seed thrown onto stone. You see, a seed does not grow because it is named. It grows because it is planted. And it is planted only when it is pressed into the soil of feeling. Second, they ask from lack. They pray for money, the way a beggar prays for bread. Please, give me. Please help me. Please, change my life. Their prayer may be sincere, yes, but sincerity alone is not the creative power. The creative power is the state from which the prayer is made, and the state of asking is the state of not having. If you say, give me wealth, you are confessing, I do not have wealth. If you say, help me, you are confessing, I am helpless. If you say, please make things better, you are confessing, things are not better. And the subconscious does not hear your desire, it hears your confession. It takes your present state as the truth. So a man may pray for abundance, and yet feel himself poor while he prays. The subconscious receives the feeling of poverty, not the words of abundance, and it must outpicture what it receives. Then the man says, prayer did not work, but prayer did work. It produced exactly what the man felt as true. Third, they negotiate with God. They imagine a distant power that must be persuaded. They bargain. They promise. They plead. They say, if you do this, I will do that. They make their worth dependent upon performance. They treat God as though God were outside them, withholding, watching, weighing, deciding. But the God who can be negotiated with is not God. That is an idol of the mind. The true God is your own wonderful human imagination. The true God is the I am within you. And you do not negotiate with yourself. You assume, you accept, you become, you enter the state. Negotiation is only another form of distance. It says, it is not mine yet. I must earn it. I must persuade life to give it to me. And as long as you live in that distance, you remain outside the very state you desire. Fourth, they doubt because they keep staring at the mirror. They plant a seed at night, perhaps only for a moment, and then they rise in the morning and measure the seed by the soil on the surface. They search for signs. They scan the day with anxious eyes. They look at the same figures and feel the same fear, and then they conclude nothing has changed. But what they are looking at is not the new seed. They are looking at the old harvest. It is like a man who plants a seed and then digs it up the next morning to see if it has grown. He finds nothing but soil, and he says, this land is cursed. Yet it was not the land. It was his impatience. It was his refusal to let the unseen become seen in its appointed season. So many lose their desire, not because the law failed, but because they could not bear the silence between seed time and harvest. They could not remain faithful. They could not live from the end when the senses denied it. And because they returned inwardly to the old state, they cancelled the new. Now, let me press this one point upon you, because it is the hinge upon which everything turns. The subconscious does not understand your phrases. It understands your sensation. It does not respond to your clever words. It responds to your inner acceptance. It does not move because you repeat a sentence. It moves because you have entered a state and felt it to be real. This is why two people can speak the same words and receive different results. One says, I am wealthy, and feels relief, ease, naturalness. The other says, I am wealthy and feels anxiety, strain, disbelief. The subconscious takes the feeling as the truth in both cases, and life produces accordingly. So when you tell me, Neville, I have affirmed and nothing happened, I do not question you. I believe you. But I also know what occurred. You spoke a desire with your lips, while your feeling remained anchored to the old state, and the subconscious, which is faithful, continued to produce the old state because you continued to feel it. This is not your fault. You were never taught the difference. You were taught that words are magic. But words are only the garments of feeling. Feeling is the secret. Feeling is the seed. Feeling is the language that reaches the subconscious. And once you understand this, you will stop trying to force your world with frantic repetition, and you will begin to change it by assuming the feeling of already being what you desire to be. You will cease praying as one who is begging. You will begin praying as one who has received. Now I can almost hear the next question in your mind, and it is a good one. You may say, Neville, if the subconscious understands feeling, how do I change my feeling? How do I feel wealthy when I have been trained to feel afraid? That is precisely where we go next. For I will show you that feeling is not strain. Feeling is not pretending. Feeling is not forcing yourself into a fever of emotion. Feeling is the quiet acceptance of a state as true. It is the inward sigh of relief that would be yours if the desire were fulfilled. It is the naturalness of possession. And when you can enter that feeling, even for a few moments, and impress it upon the subconscious, wealth will begin to follow you, because you have changed the cause. Feeling is the secret, because feeling is the language of the subconscious. I want you to hear that, not as a phrase you admire for a moment, but as a truth you carry with you, because it will explain your whole life. It will explain why the same patterns return, why certain doors always seem to open for some and not for others, why a man may want a thing intensely and yet never touch it, while another man seems to receive with ease. The subconscious is the womb of creation, and like any womb, it does not respond to argument. It does not respond to logic. It does not respond to the cleverness of your phrases. It responds to impression. It responds to what you have accepted as real. And the way you accept a thing as real is not by saying it once, but by feeling it. You may say, I am wealthy, but if you feel insecure, you are planting insecurity. Do you see the simplicity of it? The subconscious takes the feeling as the fact. It does not separate your spoken sentence from your inward state. It does not listen the way another person listens. It does not evaluate your words and then compare them to the evidence. It simply receives the state you are in while you speak, and then it goes to work, quietly, faithfully, producing the world that matches the state. So let me give you the simplest picture I know. Imagine a farmer holding seed. The seed is your imaginal act, your inward assumption, your chosen state. Now imagine the soil. The soil is the subconscious, receptive, fertile, obedient. The farmer may hold the seed in his hand and describe it beautifully. He may praise it. He may talk about the harvest he hopes it will bring. He may repeat the name of the seed again and again. But if he never plants it in the soil, nothing grows. Words without feeling are seed held in the hand. Feeling is the act of planting. Feeling presses the seed into the soil. Feeling is the moment the subconscious receives the impression and conceives it as fact, and once conceived, it must grow. It may take time to break the surface, but it is alive. It is underway. It is inevitable, if you do not uproot it with a return to the old state. Now there is another image that will help you, because states have a fragrance. Every state has its own perfume. There is a fragrance to poverty. It is heavy. It is tight. It is restless. It is a constant inner unease, a subtle fear that something will go wrong, a feeling that life is scarce, and that you must guard every little thing, because you do not trust supply. That is a fragrance. You may not call it that, but you know it in your body. It sits in the chest. It tightens the breath. It turns the mind into a watchman standing at the gate. So there is also a fragrance to wealth. Not the arrogance of showing off, not the fever of greed, but the quiet ease of sufficiency. the calm of being covered, the naturalness of paying and not wincing, the inner posture of being supported, the sense that life is friendly, that doors open, that help appears, that you are not fighting the world. That too is a fragrance, and when you put on that fragrance inwardly, the world begins to reflect it. Now here is why this matters so much. You cannot fool the subconscious. You can fool another person with words. You can smile while your heart trembles. You can say, I am fine, while inside you feel crushed. But you cannot fool the subconscious, because the subconscious is not impressed by your outer mask. It is impressed by your inner feeling tone. The subconscious is always listening to the truth of your state. This is why people who are very skilled with words can still be trapped in the same conditions. They can speak beautifully. They can affirm elegantly. They can repeat phrases with great discipline. And yet nothing changes, because beneath the surface, they still live in the old fragrance. They still feel like the one who is lacking. They still feel like the one who is waiting. They still feel like the one who is waiting. They still feel like the one who must struggle. And the subconscious, faithful servant that it is, continues to produce the matching world. So I say again, if you feel insecure, even while saying, I am wealthy, you are planting insecurity. The subconscious does not respond to the sentence, I am wealthy. It responds to the feeling of insecurity. It takes that as your reality, and it must express it. Now, do not be discouraged by this. Be relieved, because if the cause were outside you, you would have no control. But if the cause is your feeling, you can learn to change it. You can learn to enter a new state deliberately. You can learn to shift the fragrance you wear inwardly. And once you do, you will watch the world change in a way that feels almost unnatural at first, because you will be seeing the mirror produce a new reflection without you changing the mirror at all. You will change the face, and the mirror will obey. Now perhaps you are thinking, but Neville, feelings arise on their own. I cannot command them. I cannot simply decide to feel wealthy. And I answer, you have been doing it your whole life. You have been feeling your way into every experience you now call reality. You did not become the person you are by a single outward event. You became the person you are by repeated inner acceptance, by moods returned to again and again, by reactions that became habits, by assumptions that hardened into identity. You practiced your present state until it felt natural. And because it felt natural, life confirmed it. So the question is not whether you can change your feeling, the question is whether you will do it deliberately, instead of leaving it to habit. Now let me make a very important distinction, because many misunderstand the word feeling. They think I mean emotional excitement. They think I mean forcing themselves into a frenzy of joy. They think feeling must be dramatic, as though one must cry tears of ecstasy to impress the subconscious. No, feeling, as I use the word, is the sense of reality. It is the inward knowing that a thing is so. It is the quiet acceptance that would be yours if the desire were already fulfilled. If you were truly financially secure, what would you feel? Not constant excitement. You would feel relief. You would feel ease. You would feel a gentle, steady confidence. You would feel calm. You would feel a kind of inner spaciousness, as though you have room to breathe. That is the feeling you must assume, not as a performance, as a state, as a dwelling place, as a garment you put on inwardly until it becomes familiar. Now, I want you to notice something. If you can enter that relief for even a moment, you will have proved that the state exists within you now. You do not need money first to feel relief. You can feel relief first, and then money must come as the echo. This is the law that reverses the whole game of the world. The world says, when I have, I will feel. The law says, feel, and then you will have. The world says, when the bill is paid, I will relax. The law says, relax, assume yourself paid and free, and the world will organize itself to produce the payment. The world says, when I am wealthy, I will be grateful. The law says, enter gratitude as the fragrance of possession, and wealth will follow. Do you see now why feeling is the secret? It is because feeling is the cause, and the outer world is the effect. So the only prayer that matters is not the prayer of words. It is the prayer of state. Your feeling is your real prayer. Your mood is your real decree. Your inner atmosphere is your real request. And the subconscious, being the womb of creation, receives that prayer and brings forth the harvest. Now in the next part, I will show you how to enter the feeling of wealth in the simplest way possible, without strain, and how to make that feeling so natural that it begins to carry you through your days like a quiet power. For when you learn to live from that feeling, money will not be something you chase. It will become something that follows. Now let us go into the practice that makes all of this real in your life, not as a beautiful idea, but as an actual change of fortune. It is what I call living in the end. And if you can grasp this one distinction, if you can feel the difference in your own being, then you will understand why so many want wealth, yet never touch it, and why others seem to draw it as naturally as breath. There is a difference between thinking of wealth and thinking from wealth. To think of wealth is to place it outside yourself. It is to look at it as something in the distance, something you hope to reach, something that belongs to the future. It is to say, one day I will be secure. One day I will be free. One day I will have enough. And while you say that, you remain in the state of not having. You remain in the state of waiting. You remain in the state of distance. You may be sincere, but sincerity does not change the state. And as long as you remain in the state of not having, life must mirror not having. This is why so many people live in expectation and never arrive. They have made a home in someday. They have built their house in the future, and the future, as you know, never arrives. It is always a horizon that moves away as you walk toward it. So they walk and walk and walk, and life continues to say, not yet. But to think from wealth is entirely different. To think from wealth is to enter the state now. It is to occupy, inwardly, the position you would hold if the desire were already fulfilled. It is to look out upon the world from the eyes of the one who is already supplied. It is to carry the inner posture of possession, not the posture of longing. It is to breathe as the one who is covered. It is to move as the one who is free. It is to feel, not that wealth might come, but that wealth is yours. And because the subconscious knows nothing of tomorrow, it responds only to what you are now. It responds only to the state you are occupying. It responds only to the feeling of reality you are wearing. So when you live in the end, you are not trying to make something happen in the future. You are accepting something as fact in the present. And what is accepted as fact in consciousness must in time appear as fact in the world. Now I want you to feel this difference, because it is not merely a matter of words. It is a matter of inner position. The man who thinks of wealth stands outside the mansion and admires it from the street. He can describe the rooms. He can imagine the furniture. He can speak of what he would do if he lived there, but he never enters. He remains outside, and therefore he remains hungry. The man who thinks from wealth walks inside. He sits at the table. He pours the water. He rests in the chair. He feels the carpet beneath his feet. He does not speak of it as a distant dream. He lives in it as a present reality. And because he lives in it, the world must in time bring him the outer counterpart. Now you may ask, but Neville, is that not pretending? No, it is not pretending. Pretending is when you say a thing outwardly while inwardly you know you are lying. Pretending is when you put on a mask for others and do not believe it yourself. Living in the end is not a mask. It is an inward acceptance. It is the recognition that consciousness is the only reality, and that what is true in consciousness must become true in the world of Caesar. It is the understanding that the unseen is the cause, and the seen is the effect. So when you enter the end, you are not lying. You are moving to the cause. You are choosing the seed. You are planting the state, and you are letting the law take care of the rest. Let me give you a simple story, because stories make this clear in a way argument never can. A woman once came to me, worn down by years of strain. She was not idle. She was not foolish. She had done what the world called responsible. She had worked, she had saved, she had tried to plan carefully, and yet, again and again, life seemed to press her. Bills came like waves. She felt as though she could never quite rise above the surface. She said to me, "Neville, I want to be free. I want to feel covered. I want to sleep without this dread." Now notice what she truly desired. She desired not coins, but a feeling. She desired relief. She desired peace. She desired the inner state of being supplied. So I did not tell her to chase money. I did not tell her to hunt for new channels. I told her to claim the end. I said, "Tonight before you sleep, do not imagine money coming. Imagine the relief you would feel if it were already here. Feel it. Let yourself be covered in consciousness. Let the weight lift as though the matter were finished." She looked at me with doubt, because her mind wanted a plan. It wanted a method in the world. It wanted a guarantee in the mirror. But she obeyed. That night she lay down and she did something she had not done in years. She allowed herself, if only for a little while, to enter the feeling of being safe. She imagined opening her mail and seeing nothing that frightened her. She imagined looking at her obligations and feeling no sting, no tightness, no dread. She imagined saying, quietly, "It is taken care of." And she let that relief spread through her body until it felt natural enough to fall asleep. Now outwardly nothing had changed that night. No one knocked at her door with a fortune. No trumpet sounded. Yet something had changed where it matters most. She had moved into a different state. And then, as the days passed, life began to cover her. Not in one dramatic act, but through a series of natural events. A small opportunity appeared where none had existed. A conversation led to a connection. A connection led to a change. A change led to an increase. She received help from a quarter she had not expected. She found herself in the right place at the right moment, again and again. It looked like chance to anyone who did not understand. But she understood. She had entered the end, and life had rearranged itself to match. When she returned to me, she did not say, "Neville, I got lucky." She said, "Neville, it is as though the world finally began to cooperate." And I told her, "The world always cooperates. It cooperates with your state. You simply changed the state." This is why I insist upon living in the end. Because the end is the cause. The end is the state. The end is the feeling of already having received. And when you occupy that feeling, you have already planted the seed that must bear fruit. Now here is where most people lose it. They want to live in the end for a moment, and then they want to return to the old state and still receive the new harvest. They want to visit the mansion for a moment in imagination, and then they want to go back and live in the cottage of fear and still have the mansion appear. But the state must be dwelt in. It must be lived in until it begins to feel like home. That is what I mean when I say persist, not strain, not force. Persist as one who remains loyal to the end. Persist as one who refuses to bow to the old echo. Persist as one who knows that the unseen, once accepted, must become seen. And this is the great turning point. This is the line that separates the man who merely hears the law from the man who proves the law. Reality obeys the one who lives as though he already is, not the one who hopes he will be, not the one who wishes, not the one who bargains, but the one who enters the state of being and remains there. Now you may wonder, how do I enter it without struggling? How do I make it feel real enough to plant it? That is where we are going next, because there is a doorway into the subconscious where this becomes easy and natural. It is the doorway of sleep, the state akin to sleep, where the mind grows quiet and the seed sinks deep. And if you learn to use that doorway, you will find that living in the end is not a burden. It becomes the simplest, most gentle, most powerful act you do each day. Now I will take you to the doorway where this law is impressed with the greatest power, and where even those who have struggled to feel can find it becomes almost natural. It is the moment before sleep. There is a reason the ancients spoke of dreams and visions of the night. There is a reason the scripture says that in the night, when deep sleep falls upon men, instruction is sealed. For in that quiet interval, the outer senses loosen their grip. The mind that argues begins to grow still. The noisy judge within you, the one that says, "This is impossible, this is foolish, this cannot be," that judge begins to drowse. And when that judge is quiet, the door into the subconscious stands open. That is why I tell you to use the state akin to sleep. In the day, you may attempt to assume wealth, and you will find your mind rising in protest. You will look at the world, and it will contradict you. You will hear the old voice say, "Be reasonable." You will remember old disappointments. You will feel the tug of habit pulling you back into the familiar state, and you will think it is hard to remain in the end. But at night, when you are drowsy, when the body is heavy, when the senses begin to fade, it is not hard. It becomes gentle. It becomes simple. It becomes like placing a seed into soft earth instead of trying to push it into stone. Now, I want you to understand something that will relieve you. You do not need hours of effort. A short scene, vividly felt, is worth more than hours of strained imagining. The mind that tries too hard is the mind that remains awake, still judging, still doubting, still watching itself. But the drowsy mind, the softened mind, the mind hovering on the edge, accepts, it sinks, it receives. So do not make this a labor. Make it a ritual. Make it the quiet, sacred moment where you turn away from the world of shadows and enter the world of causes. Now let me speak to you as though you are doing it tonight, because I want this to be practical, not merely inspiring. When you are ready to sleep, lie down as you ordinarily do. Do not choose an uncomfortable position. Do not strain for some perfect posture. The body should be at ease, because ease is the atmosphere in which the subconscious receives most readily. Let your hands rest. Let the muscles soften. Let the breath become gentle, unforced. Feel the weight of the body sinking into the bed as though you are being held. Now do not rush. Do not hurry the mind. The mind will want to run ahead. It will want to get it done. But you are not doing a task. You are entering a state. You are preparing the soil. So you let the body grow heavy, and you let the thoughts slow. You are not fighting the thoughts. You are simply allowing them to drift, the way a leaf drifts upon still water. As you begin to feel that pleasant drowsiness, neither fully awake nor fully asleep, you are approaching the borderland. That is the state akin to sleep. In this state, you are not yet dreaming, but you are no longer bound by the harsh light of reason. It is as though the world becomes soft. The hard edges of the day begin to blur. The mind becomes receptive. This is where the seed goes in. Now at this point, you choose one simple scene. Do not choose a long story. Do not choose a complicated drama. Do not try to imagine the whole way wealth will arrive. You are not to imagine the means. You are to imagine the end. Choose a scene that would be true if you were already financially free. It might be the simple act of opening a letter and feeling relief, knowing the matter is settled. It might be hearing the voice of a friend say, "I am so happy for you. You are secure now." It might be the feeling of paying what you must pay with ease and no anxiety. It might be the sensation of looking at your accounts and smiling, not with hope, but with quiet certainty. Or it might be you holding a check in your hand, feeling its texture, and feeling the calm satisfaction of being fully supplied. Do you see what I am doing? I am not asking you to imagine effort. I am asking you to imagine possession. The scene must imply that it is already done. That is the secret. Now, once you have chosen your scene, you gently enact it in imagination. Do not watch yourself from a distance, as though you are looking at a picture. Enter it, be in it, see through your own eyes, hear through your own ears, touch what you would touch. If you imagine holding a check, feel it between your fingers. If you imagine hearing congratulations, hear the tone, the warmth, the reality of the voice. If you imagine a moment of paying with ease, feel the relaxation in the chest, the absence of fear, the simple naturalness of it. And you repeat the scene, not with strain, not with force, but softly, like a lullaby, until it begins to take on the tones of reality. That phrase is important, the tones of reality. When a scene has the tones of reality, You feel that it is happening now, not as a future hope, but as a present fact. It may be subtle, it may come as a small shift, a softening, a relief, a gentle certainty, but you will know it because the body responds, the breath becomes easier, the heart becomes quieter, the mind stops fighting. And when you reach that point, you do not need to keep going, you do not need to make it stronger, you simply remain in that feeling and allow sleep to take you. This is the ideal, to fall asleep in the act, to drift into sleep while still wearing the state of the wish fulfilled. Because what you carry into sleep is what you impress upon the subconscious, and the subconscious, being faithful, takes that impression as an instruction. It accepts it as a seed. It begins to build it in secret. It begins to orchestrate the bridge of incidents that will lead you to the outward fulfillment. Now you may ask, what if I fall asleep too quickly? What if I cannot hold the scene long? Do not worry. It is often better that you fall asleep quickly. For the impression held at the moment you slip over the edge is the impression that sinks deepest. The subconscious seizes it. It takes it as the last word, and last words are powerful. You do not need to sit for hours. You do not need to wrestle with the mind. You need only to enter the borderland and plant the right seed. And there is one more thing I must say, because it will free you from anxious effort. You are not trying to get money in that moment. You are receiving it in consciousness. The outer money is only the echo. The inner possession is the cause. The money is not sought. It is received in consciousness first. So tonight, when you lie down, you are not begging life. You are not pleading with circumstances. You are entering the state of having, and you are letting the law do what it always does, bring the outer world into harmony with the inner. Now if you do this once, and then spend the next day worrying, you will disturb the seed. But if you do this, and then carry a quiet faith through the day, the seed will grow, and you will begin to notice something subtle. Your inner conversations will start to change. Your reactions will soften. Your expectation will shift, and life will begin to meet you in ways you could not have predicted. So do not treat this as a superstition. Treat it as a law. Plant the seed at night, protect it by day, and watch the harvest appear, not as a strangeful miracle, but as the natural outpicturing of the state you have accepted. Now let me save you from one of the most common mistakes, because this single error has caused many sincere people to imagine for years and see little change. They imagine the road, they imagine the middle, they imagine the struggle, they imagine themselves trying, hoping, waiting, working the problem, searching for a way. And by doing so, they plant not the seed of fulfillment, but the seed of effort. They plant the seed of not yet, and not yet can only produce more not yet. Do you see the subtlety? A man may imagine 1,000 different ways money could come to him, and he thinks he is being wise. He thinks he is being practical. He thinks he is helping the law. Yet, all the while, he is dwelling in the state of not having, because his imaginal acts are filled with the feeling of distance, the feeling of uncertainty, the feeling of how will it happen, and the subconscious cannot build wealth out of the feeling of how. The subconscious builds wealth out of the feeling of having. So I tell you, do not imagine the path. Imagine the end. Do not imagine the means. Imagine the fulfilled desire. Do not imagine the struggle. Imagine the relief after the struggle is finished. For the end contains within itself all the means necessary for its fulfillment. The seed contains the tree. The acorn contains the oak. You do not need to plant branches and leaves and fruit. You plant the seed, and the unseen intelligence within it organizes the rest. So it is with your imaginal act. Choose a seed that implies the end is already accomplished. And that one seed, if felt as real, contains the whole chain of events that must unfold. Now people often ask me, Neville, what scene should I choose? And the answer is always the same. Choose the scene that would be true if your desire were already fulfilled, and which would imply that it is done. A brief scene that implies done is a seal. That is the simplest way to say it. It is a seal upon the subconscious. It tells the subconscious, this is the reality I accept. And the subconscious accepts it and brings it to pass. So let me give you examples, not as a list of rules, but as living pictures you can step into. You might imagine yourself reviewing a statement of your finances, and instead of the old tightening in the chest, you feel a calm satisfaction. You see figures that mean freedom. You do not need to imagine complicated details. You need only to feel the naturalness of abundance as you look. It is the feeling that makes it real. The paper itself is only a prop, or you might imagine a simple conversation. Imagine a dear friend or a member of your family saying with warmth, I am so glad for you, and you feel yourself receiving those words as a person who is finally covered, finally secure, finally free. You do not need to imagine their entire speech. One sentence is enough if it carries the end. Or you might imagine paying what must be paid with ease, not the act of worrying over it, not the act of calculating, but the simple moment of handing over the payment, or writing it and feeling no fear, feeling no resistance, feeling no inner flinch, feeling the quiet confidence of one who has more than enough. Or you might imagine the pure relief of being free, that sigh, that inner release, that moment when you would say, it is finished. The burden is lifted. The mind is quiet. The chest is open. The breath is deep. That relief is a state. And if you can enter it at night, you have planted a seed more powerful than any long drama of how it will come. Now notice what all these scenes have in common. None of them involve trying. None of them involve bargaining. None of them involve chasing. They imply possession. They imply completion. They imply that the desire is already fulfilled. That is the key. And I must warn you against a very subtle trap. Many people think they are imagining the end, but they are actually imagining the means. They imagine themselves going to a place to ask for money. They imagine themselves pleading for a raise. They imagine themselves searching for opportunity. They imagine themselves winning approval. And what is the feeling beneath these scenes? It is the feeling of not having, the feeling of I must get, the feeling of I need. And so they plant need, and need grows. So do not do that. Do not picture yourself needing money. Picture yourself having money. Do not picture yourself hoping for help. Picture yourself already helped. Do not picture yourself trying to be free. Picture yourself free. And if your mind says, but I do not know what scene to choose, then choose the simplest one. Choose the one that could be repeated softly, without effort. Choose the one that carries the emotional perfume of fulfillment. For the simpler it is, the more easily it will take on the tones of reality, and the deeper it will sink into the subconscious. When a scene is complicated, the mind stays awake, analyzing, directing, watching. When a scene is simple, the mind relaxes, enters, feels, and yields. And yielding is the doorway to the subconscious. So I say to you, choose your scene as you would choose a key. A key does not need to be large. It needs only to fit the lock. And the lock is your feeling. The lock is your acceptance. The scene must fit the end you desire, and it must be easy enough to become natural. Now, once you have chosen it, you do not improve it by adding more. You do not strengthen it by making it longer. You strengthen it by feeling it as real. You repeat it gently until it feels like something that is happening now. And when it feels like now, the work is done. Because the subconscious receives the now. It knows nothing of later. It responds only to the present reality you accept. This is why I have said for years that you must not say, I will be. You must say, I am. Not as a mere phrase, but as a state. So let your scene imply I am. Let it imply it is done. Let it imply already. And remember this line, because it will keep you from many mistakes. A brief scene that implies done is a seal. Now, in the next part, I will show you what you must do in the daylight hours, because many plant the seed at night and then uproot it by day. We must speak now of inner conversation, of mental diet, of the subtle ways you cancel your own harvest. Now we must speak of the part that most neglect, And because they neglect it, they plant at night and then wonder why the harvest does not appear. The night plants, the day protects. You cannot live two lives at once. You cannot enter the state of wealth before sleep, feel it real, seal it in the subconscious, and then rise in the morning and speak poverty all day long, and expect the seed to grow undisturbed. The subconscious is faithful, but it is also literal. It receives impressions, and impressions become facts. If you impress it with abundance at night, and then impress it with fear and lack by day, you are giving it mixed instructions. You are dividing your own state, and a divided state cannot bear a clean harvest. This is why I tell you that what you say inwardly during the day is not a small matter. It is everything. For the greater part of your prayer is not the words you speak aloud in moments of intention, but the inner conversation that runs beneath your day like a hidden river. That inner talk is your true confession. It is what you are actually accepting as real. It is what you are truly calling yourself. And the world, being your consciousness objectified, must echo it back. Many people come to this teaching, and they think the work is done when they have imagined for a few minutes at night. They believe the imaginal act is like some charm, something that works, even if the rest of their mind remains the same. And then they are puzzled when nothing changes, or when something changes and then collapses again. They say, I assumed, I imagined, I fell asleep in the feeling, and yet my days are still filled with the same fear. And I say, of course they are, because you have been living in fear for years. Fear is a habit. Lack is a habit. The inner speech of poverty is a habit. You do not break a habit by one moment of inspiration and then returning to the old conversation. You break it by replacing it. You break it by feeding the subconscious a new diet until the new becomes natural. This is what I mean by mental diet. Just as the body becomes what it consumes, so your life becomes what your mind consumes. And the food of the mind is not only what you read and hear. The food of the mind is what you say to yourself, silently, casually, repeatedly, especially when you are not trying to be spiritual, when you are simply reacting. For it is in reaction that you reveal the state you truly occupy. Now, I do not say this to make you rigid or fearful of your own mind. I say it to give you a gentle control, a quiet mastery, so that you may stop creating against yourself and begin creating for yourself. Do you know how men truly live? They do not live by the events of the day. They live by the meaning they give those events. Two men may receive the same piece of news, and one will see it as doom, while the other will see it as a bridge. Two people may face the same bill, and one will tremble, while the other will remain calm. The outer event is the same, but the inner interpretation is different. And because the inner interpretation is different, the future that unfolds from it will be different. So what must you govern? You must govern the inner interpretation. You must govern the inner conversation. And this is not hard when you understand what is happening. It is only hard when you believe your inner talk is harmless. It is not harmless, it is creative. It is the voice of I am speaking through you, clothing itself with states, and those states must become your world. Therefore I tell you plainly, your inner words are orders, not suggestions, not musings. Orders. The subconscious takes them as commands. It does not ask whether you meant them. It does not debate their justice. It does not compare them with the evidence of the senses. It simply receives, and then outpictures. So if you want wealth to follow you, you must stop issuing orders of poverty. You must stop giving instructions of not enough. You must stop rehearsing failure as though it were wisdom. This is where most people take the name in vain. Not by profanity, but by joining I am to the very condition they say they hate. Now let me make this practical, because I want you to see yourself in it. Imagine you have planted your seed at night. You entered the state akin to sleep. You felt yourself already supplied. You fell asleep in the mood of being covered. The seed is in the soil. It is alive. Then you rise in the morning. The day begins. A letter comes, a message comes, a bill comes. Something appears that would, in the old state, trigger fear. At that moment, the old self rises. The old inner voice begins to speak, and without noticing it, you begin to rehearse the old story. Here we go again. I can't keep up. There's never enough. I'm always behind. How will I manage? These words may never pass your lips, but they pass your mind. And as they pass your mind, you feel them. The chest tightens, the stomach knots, the breath shortens. In that moment, you are feeding the subconscious again. You are impressing it with the old state. And then you wonder why the new state does not harden into fact. So what must you do in that moment? You must not fight the bill. You must not pretend it does not exist. You must simply refuse to accept it as cause. You must refuse to let it become your identity again. You look at it, and you say inwardly, calmly, this is an echo. This is yesterday's harvest. It does not define me. I am already supplied. And you mean it, not as a frantic chant, but as a return to the state you planted. You feel the relief again. You feel the quiet confidence again. You breathe as the one who is covered. You do not argue with the bill. You do not beg it to disappear. You simply remain faithful to the end. This is what it means to protect the seed. The night plants, the day protects. And protection is not strain. It is not constant effort. It is simply the habit of returning to the state whenever you notice you have wandered. Just as a man might notice he has drifted into a bitter mood and choose to return to kindness, so you notice the drift into lack and choose to return to supply. Now some will say, but Neville, what if I cannot hold it all day? What if I forget? You will forget. You will drift. You are human. But drifting does not destroy your work. Only dwelling destroys it. There is a difference between a passing shadow of fear and a settled home in fear. A moment of doubt does not cancel a seed if you return to faith. But if you make doubt your dwelling place, you uproot your own planting. So do not condemn yourself for drifting. Simply return. Return again and again, gently, faithfully, until returning becomes natural. And this is how the mental diet is built. Not by perfection, but by persistence. Now I want you to see how subtle these inner conversations are, because many do not recognize them. A woman may not say, I am poor, but she may say, I must be careful, in a tone that carries fear. A man may not say, I will never have enough, but he may say, this is just how life is, with a feeling of resignation. Another may say, I'm realistic, while rehearsing limitation all day long. These phrases seem innocent, but the subconscious does not hear the surface words. It hears the state behind them. And if the state behind them is lack, it produces lack. So the true work is not to speak certain phrases like a parrot. The true work is to change the inner atmosphere. The true work is to live from the assumption of supply until it becomes the natural background of your mind. And that is why I tell you that inner speech is prayer. It is the prayer that never ceases. You may kneel for a moment with words of faith and then spend the rest of your day kneeling inwardly to fear. Which prayer will be answered? The one you live in, the one you repeat, the one you feel. So I invite you to become watchful, not anxious. Watchful like a gardener. A gardener does not rage at the wind. He does not curse the birds. He simply protects the seed. He pulls the weeds. He waters what he wants to grow. And he understands that the work is not done in one day. It is a season. It is a process. Your mind is a garden. Your inner speech is the seed you scatter. Your feelings are the water. And your world is the harvest. Now I know that some will hear this and think, must I be careful every moment? Must I control every thought? And if you approach it that way, you will create strain. Strain is just another form of poverty, because it says, I am not safe unless I control everything. That is not the state of wealth. The state of wealth is ease. So do not attempt to police the mind with fear. Instead, choose a single anchor. Choose a single simple truth to return to whenever you notice the old state rising. Let it be something like this: I am already supplied, or it is done, or I am safe, I am supported. Choose one that carries relief for you. And when the old voice begins, you return to the anchor. In time, the anchor becomes your new habit. In time, the new conversation becomes the natural one. And when the new conversation is natural, the new world appears. Now let me show you how inner conversations create outer events. Because once you see it, you will never again treat your inner speech as unimportant. A man spends his day saying inwardly, "People don't help me. No one supports me. I'm on my own." He feels it. He lives in it. Then he goes out into the world, and he meets people who behave exactly as though that were true. They ignore him, they overlook him, they forget him, they do not offer, they do not notice. And he says, "See, I was right." But he was not right. He was faithful. He was loyal to his own assumption, and the world reflected it. Another man spends his day saying inwardly, "Life is kind to me. I am guided. I am supported." He feels it. He lives in it. He goes out and he meets the same world, and yet the world behaves differently toward him. Someone thinks of him at the right moment. Someone recommends him. Someone opens a door. Someone offers a chance. And the first man looks at the second and says, "He is lucky." But again, it is not luck. It is state. Wealth too is state. And the inner conversation of wealth is not merely "I have money." It is the atmosphere of being provided for. It is the quiet certainty that the need is met. It is the inner dignity of one who belongs to abundance. It is the feeling that life is not against you. So you cultivate that conversation, not by screaming at the mind, but by gently replacing the old with the new each time it appears. Now I will give you a very simple practice for the daytime, because you will need something you can actually do, something that fits into ordinary life. At least once during your day, pause, just for a moment, and ask yourself, what am I saying to myself about money right now? Not what you are saying aloud, what you are saying within. Then listen. You may hear a complaint. You may hear a fear. You may hear a resigned statement. You may hear an old sentence you have repeated for years. Do not judge it. Simply hear it. Then, without strain, replace it with your chosen anchor. If the inner voice says, "I don't have enough," you answer, "I am already supplied." If it says, "This will never change," you answer, "My state has changed, therefore my world must change." If it says, "I'm always behind," you answer, "I am provided for in perfect ways." And then, most importantly, you feel the relief of those words as though they were true now. Not dramatic emotion. Relief, ease, a softening. That softening is the state. That is the prayer. That is the instruction being impressed. And if you do this, you are protecting the seed you planted at night. Now you may ask, how long must I do this? And I say, until it becomes natural, until the old conversation loses its authority, until the new feels like you, until you notice that your first reaction is no longer fear, but calm, until you notice you no longer rush to the mirror for permission, until you notice that even when a bill comes, your heart does not collapse, because you are living from a different state. When that happens, you will know you have changed. And because you have changed, the world must change. Now, one more thing is necessary, and it is a delicate point. Some people attempt to change their inner speech while secretly believing they are lying. They say the new words, but they say them with bitterness. They say them with sarcasm. They say them with clenched teeth, as though trying to force life to obey. That is not living in the end. That is still fighting the mirror. So your work is not to force. Your work is to enter. Enter the feeling, even gently, even lightly. If you can feel one breath of relief, you have entered. If you can feel one moment of ease, you have entered. And that is enough, because the subconscious does not need a long sermon. It needs an impression. So impress it, again and again, until the impression becomes your home. And then wealth will follow you, because you have become the one whose inner conversation commands it. Your inner words are orders. You have been issuing orders all your life. Now you will issue them knowingly. Now in what comes next, I will show you why many people are still held by the emotional weight of the past, old scenes of shame, old failures, old humiliations that continue to speak inside them like a hidden curse. And I will show you how to break that curse completely through the art of revision, so that the past no longer taxes your future. There is a reason some people can hear everything I have said, can practice it for a time, and still feel as though wealth slips through their fingers like sand. It is not because the law is uncertain. It is not because the subconscious is stubborn. It is often because the past is still speaking within them, quietly, like a hidden sentence pronounced long ago. You see, many do not realize that the past is not behind you in the way you imagine. The past is not a dead thing stored away in some distant corner of time. The past lives now as feeling. It lives now as memory. It lives now as inner reaction. And every time you revisit an old scene with the same sting, you are not merely remembering it, you are replanting it, you are impressing it again upon the subconscious. You are feeding the root that continues to bear fruit. This is why the past can rob you. Not because time has power, but because consciousness has memory. And memory is imagination in action. I have met countless men and women who carry one scene like a secret wound. It may be something that happened years ago, a rejection, a loss, a humiliation, a moment when money failed them, and they felt exposed, a time when they were turned down, looked down upon, shamed, dismissed, or made to feel small. And in that moment, something was spoken inwardly, and it became a decree. Sometimes it was spoken by another person, perhaps a parent, perhaps a teacher, perhaps a supervisor, perhaps a friend. You'll never amount to much. You're not good with money. People like us don't get ahead. You're always behind. And the words struck, not because they were true, but because they were felt. Other times it was spoken by the individual himself, in a moment of pain. I will never have. I am not lucky. I always lose. I cannot escape this. And because it was spoken with emotion, because it was felt, it sank into the subconscious like a nail driven into wood. Then life, faithful to that nail, built around it. And so the person grows older, and outwardly the scene is long gone, but inwardly it is still alive. It still whispers. It still dictates the mood that arises when bills appear. It still shapes the way the person looks at opportunity. It still triggers that subtle tightening, that quiet dread, that reflex of not enough. And because the state is still there, the world continues to echo it. This is why I say to you, the past can be the hidden root of present poverty. Now do not misunderstand me. I am not saying you must forget your history. I am saying you must redeem it. I am saying you must not allow an old scene, once felt as defeat, to continue bearing defeat in your present. You must not allow a moment of former lack to continue poisoning your expectation. You must not allow shame to become your identity. And I am also saying something far more liberating. You can change it. You can change the past, not by traveling in time with the body, but by traveling in time with consciousness. For consciousness is the one reality, and the past exists only as consciousness now. Memory is not a photograph locked in a drawer. Memory is an act. Every time you remember, you are imagining. And if you are imagining, you can imagine differently. If you can imagine differently, you can impress a new feeling. And if you impress a new feeling, you plant a new seed. And if you plant a new seed, you produce a new harvest. This is the art of revision. Revision is the greatest mercy given to man because it frees him from the tyranny of his own history. It allows him to stop dragging yesterday into today. It allows him to break the chain of repeating patterns. It allows him to become new, not merely by hoping for a better future, but by changing the foundation upon which the future is built. Now let me give you a story, not to entertain you, but to show you how this works in the marrow of life. A man once came to me who could not keep money. It was not that money never came. It would come in small waves, sometimes even in larger sums, but it never stayed. A sudden expense would arise, a mistake would be made, something would break, someone would demand. And again, he returned to the same feeling of being cornered. He told me he felt cursed. He told me he felt as though life was always waiting to take from him the moment he had a little relief. I asked him, "When did you first learn to feel unsafe with money?" At first he did not know. He spoke of recent things. He spoke of present pressures. But I asked him again, gently, "When did you first learn it?" And then it came to him. He remembered being a boy, overhearing a conversation in his home. He remembered the fear in the voices. He remembered a particular sentence, spoken with bitterness, with finality, "We will never get ahead." And he remembered, as a child, feeling the world become cold for a moment, as though life itself had announced a verdict. He had not thought of that scene in years, and yet he had been living from it all his life. He did not know it, but the sentence had become a state, and the state had become his world. So I told him, "Tonight, do not merely imagine wealth. Go back to that scene, return to it in imagination. Hear it again, but this time, do not accept it as it was. Change it." He asked me how. I said, "Rewrite it until you feel relief, until the sting is gone, until the scene carries a new meaning." So that night, he lay down, and he brought the scene before his mind's eye. He saw the room. He heard the voices. He felt the old chill try to rise. And then, instead of letting the old words be spoken, he revised them. He heard the voice say, calmly, "We are going to be all right." He heard another voice answer, "Yes, we are provided for." He felt something new. Warmth instead of cold, ease instead of fear. At first, it felt unnatural, because the old scene had been rehearsed in him for years. But he persisted. He replayed the revised version until it began to take on the tones of reality. And when it did, he fell asleep in relief. Now do you see what he did? He did not merely comfort himself. He planted a new seed at the root. He changed the feeling that had been feeding his life. And when the feeling changed, the future that grew from it changed. In the weeks that followed, he began to notice something. The same types of situations arose, but his reaction was different. He did not collapse inwardly. He did not assume disaster. He remained calmer. He made different decisions, not because he forced himself, but because the state had shifted. And then life began to mirror the new state. The sudden drains that used to appear ceased. Money began to remain. Opportunities began to stabilize. A sense of safety took root. And he said to me, "It is as though something lifted." Yes, something lifted. A past state was redeemed, and the present, no longer chained to the old root, began to bear new fruit. Now you may say, "Neville, are you telling me that by changing a memory, I can change my financial life?" I am telling you that your financial life is the visible form of invisible states, and that many of those states were born in the past. If the past continues to live as feeling, it continues to create. And if you change the feeling, you change what it creates. This is not sentiment, it is law. So let us speak of the kind of scenes that often rob people of wealth. There is the scene of rejection. A man asks for opportunity and is turned down, and he feels humiliated. In that humiliation, he says inwardly, "I am not chosen." Then he carries that identity into the future, and he finds himself overlooked again and again, not because men conspire against him, but because his state commands it. There is the scene of loss. A woman saves and plans, and then something occurs and she loses what she built. She feels betrayed by life. She says inwardly, "It never lasts." And because she lives in that state, she experiences again and again the pattern of something gained and then taken, as though life were proving her right. There is the scene of shame. A person is made to feel foolish about money, perhaps mocked for wanting more, perhaps scolded for not understanding, perhaps treated as incapable. In that sting, the person joins the divine. "I am to incompetence. I am not good with money." And the subconscious faithful produces circumstances that confirm the identity. There is the scene of the vow, "I will never have what they have. I will never be comfortable. I will never be safe. And because it is spoken with emotion, it becomes a covenant in the subconscious. Now here is the mercy. Any scene that was impressed can be revised. Any feeling that was planted can be changed. Any vow can be dissolved. Any old identity can be buried. And the method is simpler than you suspect. Revision is not a long ceremony. It is not a complicated practice. It is an imaginal act done with feeling until relief is reached. Here is how you do it. At the close of your day, or in the quiet of the evening, when you are not disturbed, you sit or lie down, and you bring to mind a scene that still carries pain. Do not choose 10 scenes at once. Choose one. The one that seems to hold a charge. The one that still stings when you think of it. The one that, when remembered, changes your mood. Now you replay it, not as it was, but as you wish it had been. If you were rejected, you hear acceptance instead. You hear the words you long to hear. You feel the warmth of being valued. You feel the dignity of being chosen. If you were shamed, you revise the reaction. You hear kindness. You see understanding. You feel yourself respected. You feel yourself capable and supported. If you experience loss, you revise the outcome. You see yourself protected. You see the matter resolved. You feel the relief that would have been yours had the situation ended well. And you do not merely think of this revision as a picture. You enter it. You feel it. You let it take on the tones of reality. Now many ask me, how do I know when I have revised correctly? You will know by relief. You will know when the emotional sting is gone. You will know when the scene no longer triggers the old reaction. You will know when you can remember it, and the body does not tighten, because you have changed the meaning, and meaning is the seed. For the subconscious is not concerned with the calendar. It is concerned with the feeling. When the feeling is changed, the subconscious has been instructed anew, and from that new instruction, life will begin to reorder itself. Do not rush this. Revision is a gentle act. It is like washing a wound. You do not scrub with violence. You cleanse with care. You may find that the first time you revise, the old memory tries to assert itself. That is natural. It has been rehearsed. It has grooves in the mind, but you do not wrestle with it. You simply return to the revised scene again and again and again, until the revised version feels more natural than the old. And when you fall asleep after revision, you seal it. You are in effect telling the subconscious, this is what happened. This is what is true, and the subconscious will accept it. Now let me give you another living example, because this will show you how revision can alter the very pattern of wealth and opportunity. A woman once told me of a moment that haunted her. She had applied for a position that would have changed her life. She was turned down, and the rejection was not kind. It was sharp. It made her feel small. She carried that scene like a scar. In the months that followed, she found herself hesitating. She stopped applying for better opportunities. She assumed refusal before she even began. She said, "It is no use," and her world reflected it. Doors did not open, because she no longer knocked with confidence. She knocked as one expecting to be turned away. Now she did not realize the rejection scene had become her identity, but it had. So I told her, revise the scene. That night, she went back in imagination. She saw the same room. She heard the same voices. But this time, she changed them. She heard the words, "We would be honored to have you." She heard warmth. She heard approval. She felt her shoulders lift. She felt her heart expand. She felt, for the first time in months, the sense of being chosen. She repeated that revised scene until she could fall asleep in the feeling of dignity. Now, what happened? Within a short time, she was offered another position, not the same one, but one that suited her better. And she walked into it with a confidence she had not felt in a long while. Life seemed to open. People seemed kinder. Opportunities seemed nearer. Was life suddenly kinder? Or had she changed the state from which life is seen? She had changed the state. The rejection no longer lived in her as a command. It had been redeemed, and the future responded. Now understand this. Revision does not always change the outer record in a way the world can trace. It changes you. And because it changes you, and because it changes you, it changes the world you encounter. It alters the bridge of incidents. It rearranges what you notice, what you accept, what you dare, what you assume. And the world, being the mirror, reflects the change. This is why I tell you that many people are not poor because of present conditions alone. They are poor because they are living with an old wound that continues to whisper limitation. They are still the person who once felt defeated. They are still the person who once felt unworthy. They are still the person who once vowed never. And as long as that person lives within them, they will recreate the same world, even if circumstances shift for a moment. But when the old person dies, the world must change. Revision is one way you bury the old person without violence. You simply stop feeding the old story. You replace it with the new. You give the subconscious a new past, and the new past produces a new future. Now, here is something very important. Do not revise only great dramatic scenes. Often the most powerful scenes are small, because they are repeated. A single humiliating moment may not be repeated, but a small daily disappointment, repeated in memory, can become a pattern. A person may rehearse the same sentence every night. I always fall short, or money never stays, or life is hard. These are not merely thoughts. They are miniature scenes, and they can be revised too. If you catch yourself rehearsing a small defeat, stop, return to it, and change it. Hear yourself say instead, I am always provided for. Feel the relief. Then go on. Revision is not confined to the evening. It can be used the moment you notice you are carrying a painful scene. But it is most powerfully done at night, when the mind is quiet and the subconscious is open. Now I want you to understand the great promise hidden in revision, because it will give you tremendous hope. When you change the past in consciousness, you change the future in facts. This is not exaggeration. The past is the root. The future is the fruit. Change the root, and the fruit must change. You may not see the change at once, but you will see it in the pattern of your life, in the kinds of events that unfold, in the ease with which opportunities come, in the way money begins to remain and multiply, in the way you begin to walk through the day with a different expectation. You will notice first that you feel lighter. That is not nothing. That is the state shifting. Then you will notice that life begins to meet you differently. That is the mirror responding. And then you will find that you are no longer bound to repeat the old cycle. The old vow has died. The old shame has lost its voice. The old never is dissolved. And because it is dissolved, the law is free to bring you what you once could not receive. Now, after you revise, you must not turn back and examine the old story as though it were still true. That is like washing your hands and then putting them back into dirt. Revision is an act of forgiveness. You are forgiving the past, not by excusing it, but by changing the feeling of it. And once forgiven, you do not resurrect it again and again. So revise, feel relief, and then go forward as the new self. And as you go forward, you will begin to see something else. The way wealth arrives is rarely dramatic. It comes by a bridge. It comes by a sequence of events, so natural you might miss it if you do not understand the law. And that is why we must speak next of the bridge of incidents, so you do not panic when the bridge begins, and so you do not uproot your seed when life starts to move. Now we come to the point where many begin well and then undo their own work, not because the law has failed them, but because they do not understand how fulfillment arrives. They imagine a thing, they feel it real, they fall asleep in the end, and then they wake and begin to ask at once, how will it happen? From where will it come? By what door will it enter my life? And in that very moment, they shift from the state of having to the state of questioning. They return to distance. They return to doubt. They return to the old habit of trying to control the manner of the gift. If you would truly live by this law, you must learn one great lesson. Do not dictate the how. Do not force it. Do not try to design the bridge. You see, When you enter the end in consciousness, you have already done the creative act. The seed is planted, the subconscious has received the impression, and from that moment, the world begins to rearrange itself to reflect the new state. But the rearrangement rarely comes in the dramatic manner. The mind imagines, it comes by a series of events, each one natural, each one ordinary, each one seemingly unimportant if you look at it with the eyes of the old state. Yet together, these events form a perfect chain leading you from where you were to where you have assumed yourself to be. I call that chain the bridge of incidence. Now hear me carefully. The bridge of incidence is not built by your conscious planning. It is built by a wisdom deeper than your waking mind, by the same power that moves your heart without your instruction and causes your body to breathe while you sleep. It is built by the subconscious as it works out the means to the end you have accepted. And because it is built by that deeper wisdom, it will often take forms you would never have chosen, and it will move through channels you could never have arranged. This is why men fail. They try to help the bridge by forcing the steps. They say, it must happen this way. It must come through that person. It must arrive by this date. It must appear in this form. And in narrowing the channel, they blind themselves to the fulfillment already unfolding by another route. They stand at one door and demand entry, while the law has quietly opened another door behind them. So I say to you, leave the manner alone. Let the end be your concern. Let the feeling be your concern. Let the state be your dwelling place, and leave the bridge to the wisdom that builds it. Now you may ask, but Neville, if I do not design it, how do I know what to do? You will know by the naturalness of your movement, for when the subconscious begins to build the bridge, you are led along it in a way that feels ordinary. You are not pushed with violence. You are not dragged. You are simply moved by impulses that seem reasonable, by desires that feel natural, by opportunities that present themselves at the right moment, by conversations that arise as though by chance. You will find yourself saying yes to something you might have ignored before. You will find yourself going somewhere without knowing why. You will find yourself speaking to someone you would not have spoken to, and later you will realize that conversation was a crucial step. But if you are not aware of this law, you will call it coincidence. You will dismiss it. You will say, that was nothing, and sometimes you will resist it, because it does not look like the fulfillment you demanded. This is why the bridge must be understood. It protects you from impatience. It protects you from fear. It protects you from the temptation to uproot your seed, because the harvest did not arrive in the costume you expected. Let me give you a living picture. Suppose you have assumed wealth. You have entered the state. You have felt yourself secure. You have fallen asleep in the end. Then a week passes, perhaps two, perhaps a little longer, and you do not see any sudden windfall. The old mind begins to whisper, it is not working. You look at the same obligations, and you feel tempted to return to the old fear. At that moment, something occurs that seems unrelated. An acquaintance invites you to a gathering. You do not feel like going. It seems unimportant. Yet you go, perhaps out of politeness, perhaps out of a simple impulse. There you meet someone who mentions an opportunity. It is not offered to you directly. It is mentioned casually. In the old state, you would have ignored it, because you would have assumed it is not for me. But now, because you have been living from a different state, you find yourself asking a question. You find yourself interested. You find yourself saying something you would not have said before. A few days later, that casual mention becomes a conversation. That conversation becomes an introduction. That introduction becomes a possibility. That possibility becomes an opening. And then, in time, it becomes the very increase you had assumed. When it arrives, it feels natural. It does not feel like magic. It feels like life simply unfolded. That is the bridge. Now, if you had insisted that wealth must come by one specific form, perhaps by a particular payment, or a particular person, or a particular event, you might have refused the gathering. You might have dismissed the mention. You might have let the bridge pass by unnoticed, and then you would have said, nothing happened. but something did happen. You simply did not recognize it. So I say to you, do not try to judge the bridge while you are walking it. You do not see the whole chain from within one link. You see only the present step. It may look ordinary, it may even look inconvenient, but if you remain faithful to the end, the steps will arrange themselves into a perfect pattern. Now there is another trap, and it is one that causes many to panic. The bridge of incidents can sometimes begin with what appears to be loss. It can begin with something closing. It can begin with a change that the old state would call negative. And if you do not understand the law, you will interpret the beginning of the bridge as a denial of your desire. You will say, I assumed wealth, and now this has happened. Therefore my assumption has failed, and you will collapse back into fear. But the bridge is not always comfortable at the start, because the old world often cannot carry you to the new. The old structure may need to shift. The old arrangement may need to dissolve. The old pattern may need to break, so that a new pattern may form. I have seen this many times. A man assumes a new state, and shortly afterward, something changes in his outer life that seems unsettling. A position ends. A familiar channel dries up. A relationship with an old circumstance shifts. And the man, if he is not aware, panics. He calls it a disaster. But if he remains faithful, he discovers that the ending was the first step toward a greater opening. The new state could not be fulfilled through the old arrangement, so the law rearranged the stage. Do you see why you must not judge by appearances? Appearances are not causes. They are only steps, they are movements, they are part of the reorganization. When you have planted a seed, the soil must move, the roots must push, the earth must shift. If you looked at the soil and demanded it remain perfectly still, you would prevent growth. Movement is not failure. Movement is life. So if you have truly entered the state of being supplied, and life begins to move, do not be frightened, do not call it denial, do not declare failure. Remember the bridge. Say within yourself, calmly, the bridge is forming. The end is certain. I do not know how, and I do not need to know how. I remain faithful to the end. This is the inner posture of the one who understands the law. Now let me anchor this with an example that is easy to understand. A man desired a new position, a better place in life, a freer condition. He assumed it nightly, he entered the state akin to sleep, and felt himself already in the new role, already receiving the respect, already enjoying the increase. Then, not long after, he was dismissed from his current position. To the senses, it looked like disaster. He could have panicked. He could have said, see, my imaginal act has failed. But he did not. He understood the law. He said, this may be the bridge. Within a short time, because he did not collapse into the old state, because he remained faithful, he found himself meeting someone who led him to the very work he had desired. The dismissal was not denial. It was relocation. It was the first step. It forced him out of a place that could not carry him to the end he had assumed. And because he walked the bridge instead of fighting it, he arrived. Now, I am not telling you that every change will look like loss. Often the bridge begins gently, with small openings, with unexpected kindness, with simple opportunities. But I am telling you that you must not interpret every uncomfortable movement as failure. The subconscious is rearranging your world to match your assumption, and rearrangement sometimes involves shifting what was once stable. So you walk with faith. Now, what does it mean to walk the bridge faithfully? It does not mean you sit still and do nothing while waiting for money to fall into your lap. That is not faith. That is laziness dressed in spiritual words. Faith is not indifference. Faith is loyalty to the end while you move naturally through the day. To walk the bridge faithfully means that when an impulse comes, an impulse that feels natural, an opportunity that appears, a conversation that arises, you do not dismiss it out of fear. You do not say, that cannot be it. You do not say, it is too small. You do not say, it will not matter. You remain open. You move without strain. You follow what feels right, not with anxious grasping, but with quiet confidence. It also means you do not force actions out of panic. Many people, after imagining, become restless. They think, I must do something to make this happen. And so they rush, they grab, they pressure others, they send desperate messages, they chase possibilities with fear. And what are they doing? They are not walking the bridge. They are abandoning the end. They are returning to the state of not having and then trying to fix it by action. Action taken from the old state produces the old result. Action taken from the new state expresses the new state. So your task is to remain in the new state and let action flow from it. If you are truly in the state of being supplied, you act differently. You speak differently. You carry yourself differently. You are not frantic. You are not needy. You are not begging life. You are moving as one who is guided. And that difference is subtle, but it changes everything. People respond to it. Opportunities respond to it. Life responds to it. Now, let me give you another picture, because pictures teach more than explanations. Imagine you have assumed wealth, and then you receive an invitation to speak with someone about a possibility. The old state would say, why bother? They will not choose you. The old state would say, you are not qualified. The old state would say, do not get your hopes up. But now you have planted a new state. Now you are the one who is favored. Now you are the one who is supported. So you go, not with arrogant demand, but with quiet certainty. You listen. You speak. You show interest. You take the step. Perhaps nothing appears immediately. Perhaps the conversation seems ordinary. Yet later that person mentions you to another, and that mention becomes an opening, and that opening becomes the increase. And when it comes, you will see that the first conversation was the bridge. Now you might say, but Neville, what if nothing seems to happen at all? What if days pass and I see no bridge? My dear, the bridge is often invisible while you are on it. You are not meant to see the whole pattern at once. You are meant to remain faithful. And there is another reason you may not notice the bridge. You are looking for dramatic signs, but the law fulfills itself in natural ways. It comes dressed in the ordinary. It comes so quietly that you could almost miss it if you are waiting for thunder. This is why I tell you that manifestations do not announce themselves. They appear as though they were the most normal thing in the world. A person calls you, a letter arrives, a conversation unfolds, an idea enters your mind, a meeting happens, and then later you realize this was part of it. So stop scanning the day for signs as though you were hunting for proof. That scanning itself is a form of doubt. It says, I do not believe. Instead, live as though it is done, and let the evidence come when it comes. You may say, how can I be sure? You can be sure because the law is sure. An assumption, though false, if persisted in, will harden into fact. If you have truly accepted the state of being supplied and you persist, the bridge must form. It is not a possibility. It is law. Now let me speak of patience, because patience is not waiting with misery. Patience is faith in motion. The farmer plants, and then he does not stare at the ground every hour demanding proof. He waters. Yes. He tends. Yes. He protects. Yes. But he does not dig up the seed. He does not call the soil a liar. He knows that the unseen process is underway. So it is with you. You plant the end at night. You protect it by day, with your inner speech. You revise what must be revised. You remain faithful, and you let the bridge unfold. Now I want you to see how liberating this is. If you understand the bridge, you are freed from anxiety about the how. You no longer need to control life. You no longer need to manipulate people. You no longer need to scheme and strain. You simply do your imaginal work, and then you move through your days with quiet openness, knowing that life itself will arrange the steps. This removes the burden. It replaces it with trust. And trust is not weakness. Trust is wisdom. Trust is the recognition that the subconscious, once impressed, is the architect. It knows ways the conscious mind cannot perceive. It can connect you with people you have never met. It can stir impulses in others you could never command. It can rearrange circumstances in a way that seems miraculous only because you do not see the unseen chain. Now let me give you a gentle caution, because it will keep you from disappointment. Do not insist that money come through one specific form. Do not say, it must come by this exact event. Do not tie your end to one narrow channel. If your end is wealth, let wealth be wealth. Let it come in its own way. If your end is freedom, let freedom be freedom. Let it come through whatever channel produces the feeling of freedom. If your end is being covered, let being covered be covered. Do not demand that it be covered by one particular method, lest you reject the very answer you prayed for. I have seen people imagine a certain outcome and receive it in another form, only to call it failure, because it did not match their rigid picture. They did not realize they had actually been supplied. They did not recognize the gift because it wore a different garment. So hold to the end, not the means. The end is your state, the means is the bridge. And the bridge is the law's business, not yours. Now here is the great line I want you to carry with you, because it is simple and it is true. The bridge builds itself, but you must walk it faithfully. You must walk it by remaining loyal to the end. You must walk it by refusing to return to the old state. You must walk it by following the natural steps that appear without fear. You must walk it by trusting that life is arranging what you could never arrange. And when you arrive, and you will arrive if you persist, you will look back and you will see the perfection of it. You will see that what seemed accidental was precise. What seemed ordinary was necessary. What seemed delayed was timed perfectly. And you will know, not as belief but as experience, that wealth follows the state of wealth as faithfully as a shadow follows a body in the sun. Now, as we come toward the close of this journey, I want to lift your eyes for a moment. Because all of this, money, supply, the rearrangement of life, is wonderful. Yes, it brings relief, it brings comfort, it brings freedom to do what you long to do. But it is still a shadow of something greater. For wealth is not the final prize. Wealth is a sign that you have touched the source. And beyond the law that gives you things stands the promise that awakens you to what you truly are. Now let me lift your eyes for a moment, because if you stop with wealth as though wealth were the final prize, you will miss the greater treasure hidden within the very law that brings wealth. I do not say this to diminish money, for money has its place in this world. It can lighten burdens. It can remove fear. It can give you freedom of movement, freedom of choice, freedom to be generous, freedom to rest. There is nothing sinful in comfort, nothing holy in unnecessary hardship. But I tell you plainly, wealth is not the substance. Wealth is the shadow. And when a man mistakes the shadow for the substance, he becomes enslaved again. Only now he is enslaved by a different idol. He may have riches and yet fear their loss. He may have abundance and yet be anxious because he believes the source is still outside himself. He may chase more and more and yet remain restless because he has not discovered the fountain from which all things flow. So I must make this clear. The law brings things. The promise awakens God in you. The law is the way by which you learn that imagination creates reality. It is the schoolmaster, the great instructor, because it shows you in the tangible world that your inner state is cause. You assume, and life reflects. You feel, and the world conforms. You revise, and the pattern changes. You live in the end, and the bridge of incidents appears. The law proves to you, again and again, that consciousness is the only reality. But beyond the law stands something greater. Beyond the rearrangement of circumstances stands the revelation of the one who rearranges them. Beyond the gifts stands the giver. Beyond the shadow stands the light. This is what I call the promise. Now, many will hear the word promise and think I mean a promise of more money, more success, more comfort in the world. But the promise of which I speak is not a bargain with fate. It is not a reward granted by a distant deity. It is the unveiling that the God you sought outside yourself is your own wonderful human imagination. It is the awakening that you are not a beggar pleading for crumbs, but the operant power, the creative presence, the I am clothed in flesh. This is why wealth must never be your final aim. Not because wealth is wrong, but because wealth is too small for what you truly are. Wealth is a sign. Wealth is evidence. Wealth is the echo that tells you you touched the source. When money begins to follow you, when you see doors open, when you find yourself supplied, when you are covered in ways you could not design, do not stop at the outer symbol and worship it. Use it, enjoy it, be grateful for it, but let it point you back to the inner power that created it. For money cannot create money. A purse cannot fill itself. A coin cannot think. A figure cannot feel. All these are dead things, given life only because consciousness has accepted a state that produces them. So when the outer evidence appears, remember what it truly means. It means you have moved in consciousness. It means you have entered a new state. It means you have begun to live as a different being. And because you changed within, the mirror changed without. Now this is why so many who win great fortunes lose them again. It is not because life punishes them. It is not because they are unworthy. It is because they never changed the source. They touched the symbol, but they did not touch the fountain. They received the effect, but they did not change the cause. A man may be given money from without, and yet remain inwardly the same fearful creature who believes he is not safe. And because he remains inwardly the same, he will recreate the same patterns, only now on a larger scale. He will spend in fear. He will gamble in fear. He will cling in fear. He will lose in fear. And then he will say, money is unreliable. But money was never the cause. His state was the cause. Another man may not have received anything dramatic at all. He may simply have changed within. He may have assumed the state of being supplied until it felt natural. And then money begins to follow him in steady ways, in multiple channels, through ordinary events that accumulate into a life of abundance. And if one channel closes, another opens, because he is not dependent on the channel. He is dependent on the state. He is living from the source. Do you see the difference? One worships the symbol. The other dwells in the substance. And I tell you, the true treasure is the substance. The true treasure is that you have discovered the creative power within you. This is why I have said again and again that the Bible is not a book of history, but a book of psychological revelation. It tells you in symbol and drama the story of God awakening in man. It speaks of states. It speaks of consciousness. It speaks of the inner journey. When Scripture says, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God," it is not speaking of a kingdom on some distant shore, nor a reward after death. It is speaking of the kingdom within you, the reign of consciousness, the discovery of the I am as God. And when it says, "And all these things shall be added unto you," it is telling you that once you find the source, the symbols will follow. People reverse this. They seek the things first. They chase the added things and ignore the kingdom. And because they ignore the kingdom, they are forever chasing shadows, forever thirsty, forever restless. Even when they receive something, it does not satisfy, because the hunger was never for the thing. The hunger was for the source. So I urge you, use the law, prove the law. Let it bring you supply, comfort, freedom, but do not stop there. Let the law point you to the deeper mystery. For the law is not the end. The law is the doorway. It is the doorway through which you discover what you are. When you assume and the world obeys, you learn something that no argument could ever persuade you to believe. You learn that imagination is not fantasy. You learn that imagination is creative. You learn that consciousness is the one reality. And if you persist, if you continue, if you go deeper, one day you will no longer merely use the law to change circumstances. You will awaken to the promise. Now you may ask, what is this promise, Neville? What do you mean by awakening? I mean the unveiling within you, the lifting of the veil, the sudden, unmistakable realization, by experience, not by belief, that you and the Father are one, that the creative I am within you is the very God you once worshipped from afar, that you are not separate from life, not separate from power, not separate from power, not separate from the source of all that is. This promise is not achieved by effort. It is not earned. It is not purchased. It comes as grace. It comes in its appointed hour. But the law prepares you for it. The law trains you. The law proves to you, in the world of effects, that the cause is within. And when that knowledge is deep enough, when it has become part of your being, the promise dawns, and when it dawns, wealth becomes what it always was, a symbol, a useful symbol, a beautiful symbol, a comforting symbol, but still a symbol. Because you realize that nothing outside you has power to give or take unless you first accept it inwardly. You realize that you are the fountain, you are the source, you are the one who decrees, you are the one who assumes, you are the one who feels, and the world is the echo. So when wealth follows you, let it be a reminder. Let it remind you that you have touched the source. Let it remind you that your inner world is the cause. Let it remind you that you are not a victim of circumstance. Let it remind you that you are not a beggar waiting at the door of life. You are life. You are the operant power. And this is why I say, wealth is not destiny. Wealth is a sign. It is the sign that you have begun to live from a new identity. It is the sign that your inner speech has changed. It is the sign that your feeling has shifted. It is the sign that you have stepped out of the state of lack and entered the state of supply. It is the echo of the inner act. Now I want you to hear me carefully here, because there is a danger when a man begins to prove the law. He begins to feel powerful. He begins to see that he can influence events. He begins to receive what once seemed impossible, and then he may become intoxicated with the symbol. He may begin to treat money as proof of his worth, as though the outer evidence were the measure of the inner man. That is a trap. For if you attach your worth to the symbol, you will fear its loss, and fear will corrupt your state. You will begin to cling. You will begin to strain. You will begin to watch the mirror again. And the moment you return to watching the mirror as cause, you return to slavery. So keep it in its true order. The law is the servant. Consciousness is the master. Money is the shadow. Imagination is the substance. And you are imagination awakened. Now there is a sweetness that comes when you understand this. It changes the whole emotional relationship you have with money. You cease to hate it and cease to worship it. You stop resenting those who have it and stop fearing those who seem to control it. You begin to see it as an obedient thing, a servant, a tool, a symbol that appears when the state is right. This is freedom. Freedom is not merely having much. Freedom is knowing that the source cannot be taken from you. Freedom is knowing that even if one channel closes, your state remains. And because your state remains, new channels will open. Freedom is knowing you are not dependent upon the kindness of men, nor the stability of conditions, nor the favor of circumstance. You are dependent upon consciousness, and consciousness is within you. This is why I tell you that the richest man is not the one with the most coins. The richest man is the one who has found the source. The richest woman is the one who knows that supply is her state, not a thing she must chase. The truly wealthy are those who are inwardly free, because then the outer world cannot terrify them. And when you become inwardly free, money follows you with less drama, because you are no longer treating it as a god. You are treating it as a servant. And servants do not need to be begged. They respond to authority. Now, if I may speak to you in the language of Scripture again, this is why it says, "Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord." Men read that and think it means to do nothing. But it means to cease the frantic manipulation of effects and to enter the state where the work is already done. It means to assume. It means to accept. It means to live in the end. And when you do, you will see salvation, salvation from the fear of lack, salvation from the habit of struggle, salvation from the belief that you are at the mercy of outer conditions. And when money begins to follow you, do not be surprised. Do not call it strange. Call it lawful, for it is the natural echo of a changed consciousness. You might say, "Neville, this is all so vast. How can I hold it? How can I live from it?" You hold it the way you have held every identity you ever lived in, by repetition, by habit, by persistence, by dwelling. You do not become rich in consciousness by admiring the idea once. You become rich in consciousness by living there, returning there, sleeping there, speaking there, revising yourself into it, and refusing to leave. And as you do, you will notice something beautiful. Your desires will begin to change. Not because you have become indifferent to comfort, but because you have touched the fountain. You will begin to want not merely money, but peace. Not merely success, but freedom. Not merely supply, but the feeling of being whole. And this is the beginning of the promise, the beginning of the awakening, the beginning of the recognition that you are greater than anything you could hold in your hand. For the hand that holds money is not the power. The consciousness that moved the world to place money in the hand is the power, and that consciousness is what you are. So let wealth come, let it follow, let it bless you, let it free you to live more generously and more gently. But do not stop at the symbol. Let it point you back to the source. For the wealth you truly seek is not merely the wealth of coins, it is the wealth of being. It is the wealth of knowing, in the depths of yourself, that you are the operant power. It is the wealth of discovering that I am is God, and that every good thing you have ever wanted is already contained within the state you dare to occupy. So I say again, and let this be the soft seal upon your heart. Wealth is the echo of having touched the source. When the outer world begins to mirror your new state, it is not merely giving you money. It is whispering to you, yes, this is true. Consciousness is the only reality. Feeling is the secret. The end is already done in imagination. And if you listen to that whisper, not with greed, but with reverence, you will begin to live with a quiet certainty that cannot be shaken. You will move through life not as a beggar asking permission, but as one who has found the kingdom within. Now there remains only one thing, to gather this into a simple instruction for tonight, and to send you into sleep with a seed that is clean, true, and powerful. For the greatest mistake would be to hear all of this and then drift back into the old habit without testing it. Truth is meant to be lived. Law is meant to be proven. So let us now close this journey by placing the key directly into your hand.